Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 14, Persuasive Speaking. As we know, our presentations always have to be ethical from the get-go, from the research stage. We need to do our research ethically. We need to make our presentation ethical, avoiding manipulation and thinking about the consequences for each audience member. So, even starting with the topic, we should ask ourselves, what is my responsibility towards covering that topic? How much do I need to cover, and what do I not forget or omit? What is my responsibility towards the audience? If I were asked to defend my ethics in public, would I be able to do so? And what does this message say about my character, ethically speaking? So those questions we ask ourselves to make sure that our speech is ethical. The process of persuasion consists of 12 phases, according to William McGuire, a social psychologist. But in our textbook, we will just condense it to 5. And those 5 steps will be awareness, understanding, agreement, enactment, and integration. Awareness, of course, it is the knowing of something, understanding something for the first time, calling attention to a problem. It is to raise consciousness about an idea or an issue. And it is especially important when listeners don't already know or believe that there is an issue to be solved. If you want your listeners to support a cause, you should first convince them that there is a need to address it. Secondly, the second stage of persuasion would be understanding. So once the audience knows that there is a problem, they need to understand the nature, the scope, the causes, likely implications of that problem or issue. And in order to give them a full understanding, you also need to look at it from all sides. So the range of contrasting opinions and views from experts, opposing advocates, as well as interest groups and individuals needs to be brought into play for your audience to receive a full picture in order to understand your topic or issue. The stage of agreement is the pleasant one where you're actually invited to interact with your audience. Agreement happens when listeners go from understanding to accepting your position. So this is when you will be receiving affirmative nods and feedback and body language and verbal messages to show agreement with your statements. So the agreement can be from very small to total acceptance, and don't be greedy. Take anything you get from your audience. Remember that you can never change people entirely. So you need to stick with this and collect the affirmation of your audience. That is the third stage of your persuasion in order to move forward with the next. So the fourth one will be enactment, enacting your ideas, your beliefs, and inviting your audience members to do something about it. Now that you have agreement, verbal or nonverbal agreement from your audience, it is time for them to act. So this is where you bring your message home. Now you invite them to do something about it. And of course, we remember that persuasion is always done with the purpose of acting, with the purpose of changing the world or changing laws, helping, building, understanding, solving problems. So taking action is more important than just simply nodding in agreement. And finally, the last fifth stage of your persuasion would be integration. This is the process of adding something new to your audience members' beliefs and values. For your persuasive speech to have a good, lasting effect, your audience members need to see the connection between their core values and the ideas that you suggest, that you propose. And again, the advice is to set realistic goals. Don't go for a very big, complete, overwhelming integration, but small steps. Even if you can persuade your audience members a little bit, then you will be moving slowly towards progress. Whereas if you set unrealistic goals, like with everything else, unrealistic goals are setting you up for failure. And in persuasive speaking, if you go for a lot of promises, if you ask people to do a lot of uh, good deeds, for example, if you're asking for money, the simplest, asking $1 is easy. If you ask your audience members to contribute $1,000 each, then they'll have to stop and think about it. So asking too much may create a boomerang effect, whereas asking in small increments, step by step, go forward, go forward. That way, you can stop when you feel that you have reached your potential. So the types of persuasive speaking are several. There are speeches that focus on facts, that there are speeches that focus on attitudes and values, and there are speeches that advocate for action and policy. And so, again, it is persuasive, it's not informative, although you can say that the fact centered persuasive speech is more like an informative one. But if your persuasion is based on numbers and statistics, if you're persuading people to wear masks, like during a global epidemic, you can say, here are statistical numbers, let's just agree that wearing a mask is a good idea. So you're focusing on facts. You can work without numbers, just attitudes and values, ethics. That's another thing. And the last one, as we said, action and policy. Just show the results, show the consequences of those actions and policies. So the designs described in your textbook, there are a few different types: problem solution design, motivated sequence design, and refutative design. You can read all about them in chapter 14. But the design could be, problem solution. Here's what we're looking at, and here's a potential solution. And so on and so forth. Motivated sequence would be, motivating people to do certain things in a sequence. And refutative design is to refute existing beliefs that, for example, that everybody is rich in this country. You can actually prove the opposite, that there are a lot of communities where people are going hungry. And so you will be arguing against something, persuading people from an opposite perspective. And finally, proof is the means of persuasion. We know that we actually follow Aristotle's example, Aristotle's structure of rhetoric, but modern rhetoricians have added another element to this. So the modes of persuasion are ethos, pathos, and logos. We know that ethos is the trust that we have in the speaker, the ethical background of the speaker. How can we believe them, their honesty, their expertise? Pathos is the feelings, the emotional aspect, the emotional appeal of the speech. How should I feel about the speaker's topic and message? And we know logos is this message supported by facts and evidence. And finally, nowadays, again, I said rhetoricians have added mythos, which answers the question whether this message is consistent with the community's shared values, traditions, and aspirations. So they brought in a mythical element to Aristotle's rhetoric. And mythos is based on the traditions and the history, shared values. Is the message consistent with our community's myth, our belief system, or not? So we're talking about integration. Anyway, so this is chapter 14 for you, and we will be discussing the last two chapters very shortly to prepare for an exam. And thank you for joining us today.